Hey, this is Karen Gordon, the Self-Healing Coach.
And this is Ann Baroque, Certified Nutritional Consultant and Naturopath.
And so today, Ann, let's talk about Candida. What's the deal?
That's my favorite topic.
You literally wrote the book. You wrote the Candida Cure.
I did. And, well, let's talk about yeast, because if you're men listening, please stay tuned because it affects you as well. I think people are still so in the dark about Candida, and what it is a single-celled yeast. It's ubiquitous, which means it lives inside and outside the body, everywhere, and it stays balanced until we disrupt that balance. The main things that would cause it to go out of balance are antibiotics, steroids, birth control, hormone replacement, chemoradiation, stress, sugar, alcohol. So you can very easily see how this gets out of balance because literally, yeah, you just need one dose of antibiotics to mess you up. So let's say you're 7, you had strep throat, and you take an antibiotic so it wipes out good and bad bacteria in the gut. Without the good bacteria, the yeast start to multiply. People go, oh, I haven't had antibiotics in 20 years. How could that be me? I say, what do you love to eat? How do you manage your stress? Because anything that turns into sugar rapidly will feed the yeast over time. So if you love, wine, beer, your vodka, this will feed it. If you love, pastries, cookies, donuts, that's sugar. You like cheese and milks, that's sugar. You like gluten, like, pastries and breads and all the refined carbohydrates, that's sugar. So it feeds it over a lifetime, and then this single-cell yeast becomes a root fungus. It likes to burrow out of the intestinal tract, and then once it's systemically in the body, it's really not so much the yeast or fungus that's bothering the body, it's the waste products that come off of it. And that's then based on genetics and other factors of where will those, basically those toxins disrupt the communication of the body. So some it can go to the brain, it's MS. Some it's going to the joints, it's rheumatoid arthritis. Some it's going to the skin, it could be scleroderma. So we're all wired differently, but that's really one of the things is that, once you actually have fungus, you start to have multiple infections such as viruses and bacteria and parasites because they all love the same environment. They all love sugar. So that's Candida.
So how come, doctors aren't on board with this? I mean, I know when I first started working with you and you said, see if your doctor will prescribe you nystatin, and I went to my doctor, who was my primary care physician, it wasn't a neurologist, and he basically laughed at me. He's like, you don't have a yeast infection, you don't need this. How come they don't know about it?
Because two things. They do know about it, but they feel that the only time they'll acknowledge it is if you have a vaginal yeast infection, if you're female. Some males might have it. And if you have thrush where the tongue's coated, or you have HIV or AIDS. Otherwise, they literally poo-poo it and ignore it. And they just consider it to be part of the natural ecosystem. It is. But because it's everywhere, it's so easily able to get out of balance based on the medicines we use and our lifestyle choices and habits and foods. So unfortunately, it's part of its ignorance. And we don't have really good tests. I mean, you have blood and stool tests, but it missed a lot. Okay. Parasites and Candida are very invasive. They like to hide in tissues and organs. So you could be loaded with it and come up negative.
Oh, really? Okay.
So a lot of this is still... And the reality is that I think it's the foundational key to turn any health condition around is dealing with Candida overgrowth.
Okay, so why do you think that? I mean, what does this have to do with autoimmune illness?
Because I believe that everything that pretty much goes on in the body, unless you've had a trauma-induced accident, really begins in the gut. Mm-hmm. Your gastrointestinal is literally, if you stretch out your intestines, it's the width of a tennis court. You have more cells here than anywhere. And I also like this whole quadrant, meaning your liver, gallbladder, your stomach, your pancreas, spleen. I think this is a critical place where all disease begins and ends. And so that ecosystem of keeping the good bacteria to bad bacteria balanced gets completely tipped by the someone sees me with autoimmune. You want to have 80% good bacteria, 20% not so good. You naturally have some Candida. But the reality is it gets inverted over time. And so when you have this condition called dysbiosis, where you have the imbalance, it sets up the conditions for you then to have all of this infection and inflammation that starts to pour into the bloodstream. And you start to feel as though the whole body itself becomes toxic, because it literally does. So it's critical, because infection is one of the main causes of inflammation. And when we're saying infection, I mean Candida overgrowth, fungus, viruses, parasites. And if you're not addressing that, I don't think you're ever going to see full recovery or remission or asymptomatic. You're not going to get there if you don't address it. Infections are key to turning around autoimmune conditions.
So are you saying that Candida causes autoimmune, or that it's a factor that you need to address in healing it?
I think it's one of the primary causes. I think it's the waste products that disrupt the communication in the body, and it starts to either directly attack those tissues and organs, or it screws up the immune system's communication that then involves T cells and things that might also be part of miscommunicating and misfiring. So I think it's absolutely one of the main root causes.
And this is the primary part of your diet plan is it's essentially an anti-Candida diet, correct?
It is. And so by doing that, the great thing is we're removing, all types of infections. We're putting viruses to bed. We're getting rid of other bad bacteria. We're getting rid of parasites. So yes, the focal point is Candida diet, but we're addressing all, because they all live in the same environment. They all love sugar.
Right.
So we are addressing that. And I think it's really the missing component, because we might look at things such as environmental toxicity and psychological stress. But these are pieces to the puzzle, and if you don't deal with infections, I think you only, like I said, see that partial recovery. It is so key and still so ignored, and that's why I literally wrote a book, The Candida Cure. It's really a 90-day program that everybody can use, because if you live in the United States, I can tell you right now, it's not a matter if you have Candida overgrowth, it's a matter if it's mild, moderate, or severe.
Right.
And if you have an autoimmune condition, it is moderate to severe.
Right.
And I just know that from 13 years of clinical experience.
And so tell me, what are some of the results that you see in the diet, and how people shift as they begin to address the systemic Candida?
Everything you can think of. I mean, usually the first thing is more energy, brain fog gone, more mobility, flexibility. It depends on what that condition is. Digestive planes go away. People actually eliminate each day. I mean, that's a big deal, but you need to move the bowels every day. People have just more clarity. They feel like they've come out of this fog where they feel like they don't even know how to stay focused. Depression, anxiety lifts, because these are things that those yeast toxins can go to the brain just as easily as any cell, tissue, or organ. So, anxiety and depression is very well connected there. So all kinds of factors. I mean, we can go on and on about what I see change. Right.
And so, I mean, what do you, to somebody who's obviously, if somebody decides to do the Autoimmune Warrior Bootcamp, we're going to address this, right? So, if to whoever is watching this who isn't already on your diet, what are the first things that they should eliminate? What are the biggest, Candida, loving no-nos?
The first thing is sugar. Right. To me, that is the most destructive chemical that we ever invented. And so I think that if you can remove the refined sugar, and that also would mean alcohol, because that is liquid sugar.
Right.
Wine, beer, champagne, the worst, because they're fermented, high sugar. So the moment I tell people that have MS in particular, it's like pouring, when you have wine, think about your myelin sheath, and when you drink it, it's like pouring Clorox bleach on your myelin. Wow. Because I feel that's how impactful it is to it. Wow. So sugar's right there with it. So I think that's the very first step, is start to lower. And if you do sugar every day, start to reduce the quantity, try to do every other day. I mean, make this doable. Make it in a way where you don't feel it has to be kamikaze, but that is definitely the first step, is sugar.
Okay. And we'll discuss more in the boot camp for sure. Well, this was good.
Okay.
Thanks, Ann. And talk to everyone soon. Bye.